Welcome to another OU Insider. Well, not another OU Insider. It is an emergency OU Insider under the visor.
Yeah, there's nothing regular about this podcast today.
Nope. It's like an old man's colon. It's pretty irregular. So today,
you phrased that very tamely, all things considered.
They usually.
You said it's like an old man's colon. I didn't think the next sentence was going to be it's pretty irregular. So
the podcast, basically because Jeff Lebby is now the head coach of Mississippi State, which we talked about on OU Insider VIP for a long time. At least the last 2 weeks, we've talked about this being a possibility, 10 days at least, the possibility of this. It took a lot longer for the announcement to come out today because we expected it around midday, and it drug out. And I guess we can talk about it now. Can't really confirm this one way or the other, but Dana Holgorsen being fired at Houston, there were multiple people telling Parker and I that there was some interest on the Houston side with Lebby, but now that seems to be pushing towards Barry Odom, Gary Patterson, and Traylor out of UTSA. So, and I know for a fact that Odom's been contacted there, but as far as the Oklahoma situation goes and Jeff Lebby, not really huge news because it was so expected, and he'd been drug out for like days and through Thanksgiving and all that, to where almost the fan base is like, get this over with. We need to find a new one if he's going to be the head coach. And now it's done. Now it's time to look at the future, Parker.
Yeah, and I think most Oklahoma fans have an idea of what the future probably holds. But even so, Brandon, most everybody is conceding that Seth Luttrell is your next offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Obviously, that just makes all the sense in the world. I think it does.
It does.
But I also think there's going to be a legitimate search and a legitimate process here.
Correct.
It's not just going to be, Seth Luttrell's the guy.
No, that's fact. And does Seth Luttrell want the job? I think that is another factor that needs to be talked about, because it's great to assume that, it's the Oklahoma Sooners offensive coordinator job. It's a super coveted position, not only because it's Oklahoma's Oklahoma offensive coordinator job, but because you have another potential year with Dylan Gabriel, which we all expect him to either transfer or go to the league at this point, right? Number two, you have Jackson Arnold already on the roster, one of the top freshman quarterbacks in the country. You have Michael Hawkins coming in, one of the top 2024 quarterbacks in the country. And you have Kevin Sperry committed to you in the 2025 class. So from a just perspective of future, yeah, it's very, very coveted. Now, Luttrell, on the other end, he's been an analyst at Oklahoma. I've talked to a couple of people that don't think that he is like jumping for joy that this. Now, obviously, he's going to throw his name in the hat. He's going to listen. Money talks. Money can make you more interested in things than maybe you first weren't. But I've been told that since he's been an OC at Indiana, North Carolina, the head coach at North Texas, there is a sense that he is comfortable with his family and the situation that's at right now. So, and to a lot of people, that's important because it is very time consuming to be an offensive coordinator with the transfer portal, the scheming, the breaking down of film, the grading of film, the recruiting, all that, and recruiting of multiple classes. And then obviously recruiting your roster on top of that in the college football world. So does he want to jump back in that fray? Because it's completely different than what it was when he got out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, as far as recruiting goes, because that's instantly what everybody's going to ask about.
Yeah.
Right. And drop some intel in that regard last night over at OUinsider.com, because I got a text probably 9:30 or so that, hey, look, Lebby's gone. Like it's just a matter of time. Nothing's official yet, but it's a formality. Like he's going to be the next head coach at Mississippi State. So made a few calls, reached out to a few folks, tried to glean what I could about the fallout that it would have with regard to recruiting, and pretty instantly found out that Brendan Zurbrugg plans to stay on board with Oklahoma. He told me, look, yeah, I'm going to have to get to know a new OC quarterback coach, but he said basically, look, as long as Coach Venables is the head coach at the University of Oklahoma, that's where I'm going. And it's just kind of a bump in the road along the way. I'll have to build a new relationship. That's fine. Zurbrug's still locked in with Oklahoma. Look, we know the situation with Kevin Sperry, right? I could have been named the next offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, and Sperry would stay committed.
Yeah, well, there were people that thought that wasn't. They thought they were worried about him, and so I just
that kid moved his whole. That kid and his family
exactly
moved
right.
to the state of Oklahoma.
His dad's exact quote to me was last night was, "There's not going to be any more changes." I knew what he was getting at. I said, "No, Brent Venables is going to stay." He goes, "Good, because we didn't move our whole family up here for that whole staff to dip out on us. So as long as that's the way it is, they're good to go." So now, yeah, it hurts relationship wise, but they've got time, right? Being 2025.
I think what's going to be most interesting to me here is as long as Joe John Finley is retained at Oklahoma,
buyouts may be the issue there.
Long as he doesn't make a move, Devon Mitchell is more than likely staying locked in with OU. Now that was as of last night, right? Things can change when the Miamis and Alabamas and Tennessees of the world loop back around because they see that the program he's committed to has lost its offensive coordinator, and maybe they start sweetening the pot a little bit. So obviously that's something, especially with a player of his caliber, it's going to be something that we monitor, that we track closely. But Devon Mitchell to this point has said all the right things to us about his commitment status at Oklahoma. Now, what's going to be interesting is what happens with Michael Hawkins, because of Oklahoma's 3 quarterback commits right now, I think he is the one that would be most prone to look elsewhere depending on the OC hire. And look, what I was told from speaking to folks in Hawkins camp is that if Seth Luttrell is the guy, they're 100% on board with that. They love him. Their relationship with the staff at Oklahoma doesn't start and stop with Jeff Lebby, right? Obviously, Brent Venables was very involved in that process. I was told he was actually on the phone with Mike last night, which, kind of tells the whole story. Like, Venables knew, maybe he didn't know that this was going to happen, but he had that inclination, as we all did, and was being proactive about it. He was on the phone with Hawkins last night. Emmett Jones has built a really strong relationship with Hawkins and his family, so that strengthens the connection there. But at the end of the day, the decision to come to Oklahoma was a business decision for Hawkins and his family. And yeah, they love OU. Do not get me wrong. They love the University of Oklahoma, and they love that Mike's going to have the opportunity to be a Sooner. But by the same token, of a large portion of the reason why they committed to Oklahoma in the first place was because Mike loved Jeff Lebby's offense and saw himself as a very natural hand-in-glove fit, to the point where his final 2 schools for the longest time were the 2 schools that employed offensive coordinators who run virtually identical schemes in Lebby and Kendall Briles. Brothers-in-law, worked on the same staff for years and years. Like, we know how close Lebby and Briles are, not just familially, but as friends. Lebby said it after the game on Friday, excuse me. That's still throwing me for a loop, that he and Briles are as tight as you can imagine. So I'll be interested to see how the hire affects Hawkins' recruitment. There's a little bit more intrigue there now than there was previously. My heart of hearts, I figure he stays, but I don't think you can take that as a certainty, because he is a quarterback, and quarterbacks bonds with their OCs, and especially an OC like Lebby, who was also the quarterback's coach, with as far as the relationship went back, not just between Lebby and Hawkins, but Lebby and the family, him having come in the same recruiting class back in 2002 as Mike Hawkins Sr. That's not a bond that's easily broken. And that was a large part of the onus behind the decision for Michael Hawkins to commit to OU in the first place. So that's another situation that we're going to be monitoring in the days ahead, because, again, of the 3 quarterback commits, I think that's the one that could be most in flux depending upon who the next offensive coordinator at OU ends up being.
Yeah, no, so you really, and I get everything you're saying here, but to me, I find it hard just to believe as far as Hawkins leaving and going elsewhere, just because the family has been just so locked in with Oklahoma. Now I know you know more than anybody when it comes to the Hawkins situation, so I'm not questioning you on that. I want clarification a little bit just for our listeners and everybody else. What do you think the odds are? What, I guess, what type of OC, or like name an OC that if they were hired, you could see Hawkins going, okay, well, that's not a fit. We're moving out, so that fans can get
I don't
kind
know.
of an
'Cause, like,
idea of what type of offense they're not willing to be a part of. Does that make sense?
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let me think about this. What's an offense? I'm trying to think here. What's an
K-State.
offense that typically in the past, or a coordinator that typically in the past has not? Who's the offensive coordinator at Arkansas right now? Who replaced Kendall Briles?
Oh my gosh. Dude, if you hadn't asked me that, I would be able to tell you. Um, wasn't it
It was Dan Ennis. That's who it
Ennis,
was.
the guy from Miami, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
he only lasted half
like
a
half the
season.
season. Yeah,
Yeah. So, okay. And there you go. That's an example of a guy whose personnel didn't exactly mesh with his offensive game. Like, he really didn't know how to use KJ Jefferson, a dual threat guy, because that's not what his offense is predicated upon. And so it's a guy like that. The way it was phrased to me was, it's basically got to be a guy who has a history of using quarterbacks with Hawkins type of skill set. And look, just because I think it's not a certainty that Hawkins sticks does not mean I'm trying to raise alarm about the possibility that he may decommit. I think the chances that he signs with Oklahoma are darn near 90%. I can't put it at 100%, but I think it's an overwhelming likelihood that he sticks out, as long as Oklahoma makes an OC hire that meshes well with the scheme that all of these guys have learned over the last 2 years and the personnel that the Sooners have cultivated on that side of the football. As long as you don't go to the opposite end of the spectrum, which I don't think they will, as long as you hire somebody who comes from the same discipline as Lebby and has at least some conceptual similarity in the way that they structure and operate their offense, I'm not really worried about the situation with Hawkins. And obviously, again, Zurbrugg and Sperry, those 2 guys are locked in any way you slice it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. And then obviously the other person you worry about a little bit is Devon Mitchell. But and you brought up Miami, and Miami was the other school that made a push for him. That said, they were rough around the edges this year again, in the win column, right? So I don't know that you could look at Miami, and I get NIL talks and all that type of stuff, but at what point do you look at what Oklahoma's already accomplished underneath Venables, 6-7, now 10-2, and you go, okay, well, you know what? My buddies are going there. It's moving in the right direction. And it just feels like that seems to be the right move for Devon Mitchell, no matter who they hire at this juncture, as long as they're willing to use the tight end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Devon Mitchell just tweeted as we were sitting here on the air recording this podcast. He tweeted, "I'm locked in. I'm not going anywhere." So
boom, there you go, folks. There it
that
is.
to me, like, it, obviously, like, we've been recording this podcast. I haven't had the chance to correspond with sources in any capacity, but that right there would tell you Joe John Finley's not going, because if Joe John Finley were going, Devon Mitchell probably wouldn't tweet something that definitive.
And if you've been on OU Insider, you would know that I reported last night the expectation right now is that Joe John may be the interim OC, to keep things the continuity there within the staff. The players love Joe John. He understands Lebby's offense. He's been with Lebby at Ole Miss. Obviously, he worked with Heupel, I believe, at Missouri, correct? So there's a lot of strong connections there as far as the offenses go, and the Bryles connection. And so it makes sense if Joe John is considered the interim OC. I want to make that clear. Interim OC. And we're not reporting he has been chosen as that. I was told that that is a very strong possibility at this juncture, though, heading into the bowl, because you've got to have that interim OC title thrown out there. And so, and another thing I heard on Joe John Parker, and I spoke to a source today, is that I guess there's some buyout issues potentially. I was talking to some agent type people. I guess there's some buyout issues that he has had to work through, and I don't know that he wants to go through that again to make another move. So I think his family is very happy. I think he's very happy at Oklahoma. So the expectation right now, and look, we could end up being wrong, because coaching, the carousel is crazy. You never know what schools are willing to pay for what to get you out of certain contracts and situations. But as of we sit here 5:34 on November 26th, the expectation for Parker and I is that Joe John Finley is likely to stay at Oklahoma right now. And that's good, because if you can somehow keep Joe John, DeMarco, Beatenbow, Emmett Jones, and you just add an OC QB coach, that's huge. That's huge. Now it's a matter of who could that be? If it's not Seth Luttrell and it's not Matt Wells, both obviously offensive analysts for Oklahoma right now, both former head coaches, mind you, both successful offensive minds that not only understand what Lebby was doing offensively, but could also add their own little wrinkle and trinket to the situation and the scheme in which they're running at Oklahoma as it sits today. Who else would Oklahoma look at? Like, if you were looking at a hot board and you wanted to throw that out there, your 1 and 2 has to be Latrell, Matt Wells, right? 3 has to be Joe John Finn. Those
Sure,
3 have to be your top 3, right?
Yeah, if you're not going to promote from within, and I think promoting from within makes a ton of sense if you're trying to maximize continuity.
Correct.
But if you're not going to promote from within, honestly, Brandon, I think you got to look at guys, and I'm going to say his name, even though nobody likes to hear it. You're going to have to look at guys from the Art Briles coaching tree, because there is a rhyme and reason to every single hire that Brent Venables has made as head coach at Oklahoma. And even when he's gone with an outsider, you look at last January, or I guess this January, in bringing in Emmett Jones, who had no ostensible ties to Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
That was a guy where, okay, you wanted to build deeper recruiting relationships in the state of Texas. Who's got that on lockdown more than Emmett Jones? And so that made a ton of sense. They brought him in. He's been a hit. He's had a dramatic impact on not only Oklahoma's wide receiver play on the gridiron, but also the Sooners' recruiting efforts at wide receiver and elsewhere in the Lone Star State. So I think if you are mindful of the fact that your offensive personnel across the board have been learning this scheme, have been learning this playbook for the past 2 seasons, then if you're going to hire externally, you're probably going to want to start with a pool of guys who are going to bring in a playbook that has a lot of similarities in language and in terminology and in scheme to Lebby's. So I'm working on pulling up the Art Briles coaching tree so I can have a more intelligent idea.
How about these two names? Just so while you do that, I'll throw these two names out. And I'm gonna go a little bit off the Art Briles tree here.
Okay.
And I'm gonna throw these two names out. I think if you're Venables, you want to have some run game in you, right? Like you're a defensive minded coach. You probably want a little bit more time of possession to work in your favor. Sure, you love the explosive plays, you love the scoring because it relieves the pressure off your defense, but at the same time, you need that balance of explosive plays and time off the clock, right? Like I think you've got to find that. So how about a Sean Lewis and or a Will Stein type guy that could go out there?
I
And I
really
know Will
like Will
Stein's going to
Stein.
be hard to get.
That would be hard to get.
But he's got UTSA ties. He's got Texas ties. You combine him with Emmett Jones, and that would just be killer in the state of Texas. Right? Like Sean Lewis, he's more of a Midwest guy. So I don't know that I feel as comfortable saying him. I know fans are going to hate this name, but I'm going to say it. What about Kendall Briles?
Oh, boy.
I know, right? Fans will hate that. Fans will hate that. And I give it zero chance that happens. But if you're looking at the Briles tree, a guy that's been very successful at Florida State, he's been successful at Arkansas, and they've scored some points at TCU. So, and you want to know,
let me give you, hang on, Brandon. Let me give
and
you
I think there's zero chance, and I wouldn't hire him, but that's just me. But I'm just saying, like,
here's another name. Here's another thought. And this sprung to mind as I was looking at Mike Leach's coaching tree. And it occurred to me because you were mentioning Sean Lewis. And Sean Lewis left what was, in essence, a dead-end head coaching job at Kent State to go be the OC at Colorado. And look, I mean, what realistically, what kind of program can you build in the Mid-Atlantic Conference, right? What can you hope for at a place like Kent State? Maybe win double-digit games once every 3 years or something like that. I mean, that's a league that just eats itself up. It cannibalizes itself. There's so much parity, so much competition. And so I think Sean Lewis realized, okay, if you're thinking career mobility, if you've got a forward-thinking approach, then going to be an OC in the Power Five probably offers you more of an upward mobility for your coaching career than continuing to be the head coach at a place like Kent State. And that reminded me of a guy who's in a similar situation right now and is probably in line to get the axe after 2024 if he does remain the head coach at his current spot. And that would be Sonny Cumbie down at Louisiana Tech. And that is a guy that would have crossed paths.
That's a very good interest.
Yep. So think about this. Comes from the Leach tree, played under Mike Leach at Texas Tech. He's worked on staff at both TCU and at Tech. Obviously, a lot of deep-seated ties in the Lone Star State there. And, like, again, would it be that difficult to get him away from a place like Louisiana Tech to be your offensive coordinator? And I kind of halfway, I think Joey McGuire was an awesome hire for Tech, but I recall back in 2021, there was some thought that with the way that the team performed with Cumbie as the interim coach after Matt Wells' firing, maybe they might just retain him and remove the interim tag. But again, you think about Matt Wells right there, another guy that, like, Cumbie was Matt Wells' OC at Texas Tech. So that right there, boom, connection. Again, same coaching tree as Jeff Lebby. So there are going to be conceptual similarities there, linguistic similarities. And another dude right there that I think if you're going to go down that road of exploring external candidates, that's one of those names that makes sense.
So I know people around Cumbie really well. I just reached out to sources. We'll find out if he would be interested in making that move.
Very nice.
um, I was trying to think of some other guys that have been in this region or area that have had success as up. You know what? What about Bobby Petrino?
I mean,
He's a genius offensive mind.
I just it's not that he's a bad coach, because he's not, right? Like, he's objectively been a reasonably successful coach
Yeah.
over the course of his career. But how do you get the fan base excited about that one? You know,
I
like,
mean, yeah, well, I get it. I mean, there's not. I guess what names would the fan base get excited over? I would. That's the question, because that's going to be really hard. This fan base hated on an OC that was third in scoring offense in the country.
sure, yeah.
I mean,
Honestly, like,
they've seen such excellent offense from 2015 to 2021 that they're like, anything that doesn't remotely resemble what they saw for that 6-year span is crap to them.
you know,
So,
you know what decision would get the fans going, oh hell yeah, let's rock? You just let Emmett Jones call plays. If you're looking to completely appease the fans and you just want the fans to be happy,
is
Emmett
he
Jones
ready for that?
UOC. Well, look, again, that is, like, practically, I don't know that that's the greatest idea, but I'm telling you, like, that if all you wanted to do was fire the fans up, if you were taking the Texas A&M approach and you were just like, all we want with this is for our fans to be happy, you promote
And
Emmett.
keep the players and keep
Yeah,
the
dude,
players.
Texas A&M is a debacle. Apparently,
We can talk about that here in just a minute. We'll talk about that here in a minute, because
Oh
we got to
God,
talk about that. Fans, we will talk about that too. That has been a topic. I know I've been on the phone with a lot of people trying to figure that stupid thing out for a while as well, but we'll talk about that. I'm trying to look up all the top offenses in um college football, because I think that's probably the approach that BV is going to take. Um, so I'm trying to look it all up here and figure out who their OC is. So we all know Lashley runs SMU's. Um, who I'm looking at, and most of these up here, bro, are like outside of Stein at at Oregon. Who's North Carolina's OC?
this year, gosh, I couldn't tell you offhand. I know Phil Longo just left.
Yep.
I
But
don't
I, and I
know.
also think, and I also I
Chip
take North Carolina.
Lindsey, that is
Yeah,
North
and
Carolina.
I take that success there with a grain of salt, because it's led by one of the top quarterbacks to come out in a long time. So, Liberty Flames, who's their OC? Do we know?
Oh, that's Willie Corn.
I mean, he would be a good hire.
There was a lot of noise made on OU Twitter earlier this year about Willie Corn, back when people were ready to fire Jeff Lebby. Um,
Texas State.
Willie Corn does not have a ton, so he's a Clemson guy, and that right there might be a connection.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so he played quarterback at Clemson.
What year?
He does not have. He's a young guy, 34 years old. Does not have a ton of experience calling plays relative to some of the other guys that would be in that candidate pool. He called plays for 4 years at Coastal Carolina, 19 to 22, and then moved with Jamie Chadwell from Coastal to Liberty this past offseason, and has spent one season as the OC at Liberty. They're 12-0, by the way. So, yeah, again, like, I think that's probably one of the bolder out of the box hires you could make. There are some folks that you would probably have to sell on it just because they wouldn't be as familiar with his name. as some of the other options, but that is also one that could end up paying huge dividends in the long run if, and I hate to go here, but like if you hit a home run the way that you did with Lincoln Riley, bringing him in as OC.
Yeah.
Like if he turns out to have some of the same revolutionary success at the Power 5 level as Riley did upon coming over from East Carolina, excuse me, then 5 years down the road, he might be one of the sexiest, most highly regarded offensive names in the profession. But there's just, it's that's one you kind of got to go out on a limb on because
I don't think that's a
the
limb,
body of
bro.
work is so limited.
I don't think that's a limb. I mean, you look at what he's been able to accomplish, calling the plays at Coastal Carolina for 3 years and now calling the plays at Liberty, and you're losing a quarterback coach, right?
Yes.
You're losing an OC quarterback. That's exactly what he is. He may have just moved up to the top of my list of guys that I would like to see Oklahoma hire. I'm on the Willie Corn train now, Parker. Choo choo.
Well, I wouldn't hate it.
It would be a good hire. It would be a good hire.
I wouldn't hate it. Like, again, it would take some, well, how do I phrase this? Especially as far as recruiting is concerned, it might take a little while for him to really kind of dig in and establish himself, because a lot of recruits just aren't going to know who he is, right? Plenty of people are going to know who Kendall Briles or Sonny Cumbie or even Seth Luttrell, especially recruits that you're going to pursue that are within your geographical radius, your fertile ground, as it were. If you're trying to recruit primarily in the state of Texas in the 2025 cycle, as Oklahoma is, people are going to know Sonny Cumbie. They'll know Kendall Briles. They'll know, obviously, Emmett Jones. They will know somebody like Seth Luttrell. Willie Corn, a lot of those guys are going to be like, who's that? So it's going to take a little longer probably for him to really dig in. But yeah, I mean, I don't hate that. Mm-hmm. I don't hate that. He's had success as a play caller. Those offenses that he has commandeered have been prolific. And Grayson McCall, I don't know what became of him as an NFL prospect, but I think he stuck it out at Coastal post Willie Corn, and his stock has kind of fallen. And then Caden Salter right now has been lighting it up at Liberty. So as far as a guy who's gotten the most out of his quarterbacks, Willie Corn certainly falls into that category.
Mike Denbrock, LSU. He's the OC tight end coach, but he has been a defensive coordinator in his coaching career. He has coached the offensive line, tight ends, quarterbacks, wide receivers during his time as a offensive coach. He has been an offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. He's been an offensive coordinator at Cincinnati and now at LSU. Now, he's got a long tenure where he coached underneath Brian Kelly. So he was with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame from 2010 to 2016 before going to Cincinnati and becoming the offensive coordinator and QB coach. And now he's at LSU as the offensive coordinator and tight end coach. Mike Denbrock, would that be of interest or a name that would pique your interest a little bit?
I mean, naturally, yes, I think it would. Anybody who is approaching it from the standpoint, okay, we want a guy who's done it before and done it at a high level, Denbrock fits that bill. And I think if you were able to steal him away from a place like LSU, that's something that at face value fans are going to get excited about, right? They'll be like, oh, we stole LSU's guy? Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, in an immediate sense, I think that would go over well.
All right. What about Brennan Carroll from Arizona? 44 years old. He has coached at the only issue you would have with that is that he has no quarterback coaching experience. It's all been wide receivers, tight ends.
Yeah, well, and also
Offensive
just,
line.
I mean, that is Pete
That's where you
Carroll's
got. That's
kid,
what you got to
by the
run
way.
into.
That's Pete Carroll's kid.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got football in his genes, that's for sure.
Yep.
But he's also
Yep.
just got no apparent ties to Oklahoma. So that would
Correct.
definitely be an outsider hire.
But outside of Latrell, actually, you want to know what? Here's the easiest hire you could do. But the problem is that he's a tight end, just like all the other ones. He's a tight end and offensive line guy. Never coached quarterbacks, and rightfully so. He's played offensive line his whole life. He's 37 years old. He is an Oklahoma guy.
Oh, I see where you're going here.
He's an interim head coach at Michigan right now. Sharon Moore.
I'm going to say this, Brandon, and it might be unpopular. I don't know right now if you could convince Sharon Moore to leave Michigan.
I agree.
He is so entrenched there.
I agree, but I had to ask. That's just one of those type of deals. I think the last name I would look at is Kansas Jayhawks offensive coordinator
Andy Kotelnicki.
Andy Kotelnicki. Yep. Is he another? But he's probably another offensive line guy, right? It seems to be
He has only ever been an offensive coordinator. He did play offensive line in college. He has never been responsible for a position group.
So how could you get around that? How could you get around that? If you're Brent Venables, you have to bring in a guy now that is an offensive guy and a quarterback guy. You have to. I don't think there's any other way around it, Parker. You have your O-line coach, you got your tight end coach, you got your running back coach, you got your wide receiver coach. Unless one of those guys leaves, the combination of your offensive coordinator is what it is. It's got to be a quarterback offensive coordinator.
That would make, I mean, that'd be easiest, right? Because you lose one coach.
It's
a 1-for-1 replacement. It's a 1-for-1 replacement. Again, yeah, if you don't find an OC quarterbacks guy, then you have to shuffle some stuff around if Joe John Finley's staying, right? Because it would make all the sense in the world if Finley were to go with Lebby to Mississippi State. Okay, Seth Littrell, even if he's not your OC, he becomes your tight ends coach, right? Because he has coached tight ends in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have to figure out a quarterbacks coach if your OC can't also fill that role.
It almost makes it feel like Matt Wells is the best fit at this point. The quarterback and offensive coordinator guy. So, all right, feet to the fire. What coaches leave with Jeff Lebby?
Matt Holacek.
Yeah, we both agree with that. Yep.
Outside of that,
Jay Valai, maybe DC.
I don't think Valai leaves. Do you?
I don't know. I doubt it. I think it's gonna be really hard. Maybe people keep asking. I hear, about Brandon Hall, and I don't expect that to happen. At least as we unless something changes over the next week, I don't expect that to happen.
Holacek is obviously, with his ties to Lebby dating back to the Ole Miss days, he's somebody that you figure will be headed to Starkville. it's hard to, I mean, there could be guys in off-field roles right now, or analyst roles that, Lebby is willing to give them the promise of a greater responsibility, more money, maybe an on-field position, and they could follow. But the two that you would look at immediately as guys that could very realistically follow Lebby would be Joe John Finley. And again, our expectation is that he stays. And then Holochek, I would figure he probably goes.
Defensively, you think everybody stays? I mean, what about look? Ted Roof's contract's up January 1st or February or whatever.
Does he want to coach still? That becomes the question.
That becomes a question. And number two, would he move back and finish up at Mississippi State, like in the South? Is that something? And would Oklahoma be looking to fill in? Like, because there's been buzz over that, right? Like, we've all heard it. Like, there's been Zach Arnett buzz. There's been Brian Odom buzz. There's been all sorts of stuff because Roof's contract's ending. Now, people I talk to think that he's going to either become an analyst, retire, or sign another 1-year deal with Oklahoma as the co-DC. So I don't know how I feel about that, or if I feel anything, I guess, for that matter. It's just interesting, right? Because there has to be more than just Holochek that leaves with him, right? It just doesn't feel like
I expect there will be. I just, it's hard to identify right now who those guys would be.
Maybe Matt Wells leaves and is like the wide receiver guy for them, or the O-line guy, or the tight end guy. I don't know for them. Maybe because Joe John decides he wants to stay at Oklahoma like we expect. I mean, defensively, a lot of the guys that came to Oklahoma, they're BV guys, So, all right, feet to the fire real quick. It's November 26th, 6 p.m. Who's the next offensive coordinator at the University of Oklahoma?
Oh, man. It depends on whether you want to go with the safe answer or you want to go outside the box, because the safe answer is Seth Luttrell, right?
Are you going to go safe? I'm not going safe.
Okay, I will go safe. I'll let you go outside the box. I will say it's just Seth Luttrell. They promote from within, maximize the continuity. That's that.
Okay, so I agree with you, but for podcasting's sake.
Oh, so you don't actually think they're going to go external then?
It's really hard to believe they're not going to hire Seth Luttrell as the offensive coordinator right now. He's the leader of it, but does he want it? Does he want that job? Does he want that title? Does he want that time away from his family? Is the money that big of a deal? All that. I don't know yet. I don't know. But for argument's sake, let's say he decides he doesn't want to do that and he wants to enjoy another year or two as an analyst before he partakes in the world of coordinating and or position coaching or head coaching again. Speaking of Seth Luttrell. And the same goes for Matt Wells, okay? I'm going to go Willie Korn. Clemson guy, has been super successful, and he fits the offensive coordinator, quarterback coach combination that if the offensive staff stays as is, that's your only option. That's your only option. And Seth Luttrell has never coached quarterbacks. Correct?
No, he has not.
You've looked at it?
Yes, he has not coached quarterbacks. He has only ever coached.
I'm going with Willie Korn, baby. And I don't even know that I don't even know that I feel good about it. But
it's a shot in the dark.
The shot in the dark. It's probably going to be Seth Luttrell, but podcasting's sake, I'm going to go Willie Corn because it's a boring podcast if we don't at least do this, right?
That would be, again, a very Lincoln Riley-esque hire where
don't equate them together. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me.
You know what I'm getting at.
I know what you mean, but fans, they hear that and they're like, instantly they hate Willie Corn now.
Oh, you could have a lot of fun with his last name too, as far as social media content and memes if he does get hired. So that would be fun. But yeah, again, if you bring a guy who's well regarded and has been successful in the G5 ranks to the Power 5, again, for a place like Oklahoma, at face value, that's a pretty steep jump, right? But if it pays off, as you've seen with Riley in the past, might not be all that long before Corn is a household name across the country. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be Corn. It could be, I mean, gosh, somebody in my mentions was saying Clint Trickett, who just got fired as the offensive coordinator at Marshall. So I hardly think a guy that couldn't crack it at Marshall ends up the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, but that's just me.
Last time we saw him, he was laying on his back because Venable's defense kept hitting him at Florida State over and over and over and over. And then where'd he transfer to? Because he played Virginia, and he was laying on his back there too. All right. We've kind of exasperated the OC talk here for right now. A&M, Mike Elko. That's who I said they were going to hire because.
Well, they haven't officially hired him yet, Brandon.
Yeah, that's true.
Again, everybody is kind of jumping the gun on this the way they did with Mark Stoops. Nothing is finalized. And in fact, I got a text about an hour ago from somebody saying like Elko actually wants to stay at Duke if they can make it worth his while. So I who knows at this point? Maybe A&M is about to A&M this up all over.
They're going to go Elijah Robinson and all the people that think that's a good hire. I'm sorry, that is not a good hire. Sure, you get to keep the players that have not won for you. Congratulations. Your culture stays the same. Yay. Now you've set yourself back another 5-10 years. So
the Aggies, man.
Yeah,
it's always quality entertainment with that group. I mean, they let their fan base bully the administration out of the Mark Stoops hire.
Just so stupid. That was a great hire.
It is something I have never seen before. And everybody was immediately saying, oh, of course you have. It was like Schiano in Tennessee, right? No, the reason the fans cried foul on Greg Schiano at Tennessee, those reasons were very legitimate. Right. A&M just decided, or the fans just decided, no, we don't like Mark Stoops enough. He's not a good enough coach to get this job. And then it all fell through.
He's won more at Kentucky than Fisher did at A&M. And
Kentucky is a freaking hard place to win football
games. Yes. What? A&M's got to stop screwing this crap up. That's all they do is just botch football crap over and over. And I've had people come up to me like, well, if they go Elijah Robinson, they'll have more NIL to go hire a good OC, a good whoever else they want to hire, and have more money to go buy recruits. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, the whole buying thing is why you're in this position.
Yep.
You got to stop doing that. Build a culture.
Mark Stoops is a culture guy.
And he would have gotten rid of that whole staff, offense and defense, and brought in his own guys.
Exactly. And you would have, here's the thing. He would have been a good hire, but
they would have lost the start.
They would have had to give him control. More control than they're probably willing to relinquish.
Control and trust. The same reasons why Texas and Texas A&M struggle to win consistently are because the donors and their fans have too much control in those two programs. Tell me I'm wrong, Parker.
You are not wrong. And here's what doesn't make sense to me. How is Mike Elko any sexier of a hire than Mark Stoops? because that is what I just do not understand in any capacity. Mark Stoops has won 10 games twice at the University of Kentucky, which is, sorry, Mark, as John Calipari said, it is a basketball school.
Right.
Kentucky is a basketball school that historically has not been consistently competitive in the sport of football, and Mark Stoops has made them consistently competitive in football. Now, I think back to when James Franklin was hired at Penn State. Was anybody panning that hire at the time? Because James Franklin never won more than 8 games at Vanderbilt. But the fact that he won 8 games at Vanderbilt, that was impressive enough that Penn State said, come on down. And now, admittedly, like he's in a tough spot up at Penn State because he's got to get past the Ohio State-Michigan roadblock that has proven so difficult a hurdle to clear for years and years now. But James Franklin has established a culture at Penn State and is consistently winning double-digit games with that program. A&M has won double-digit games once in the last quarter century.
Oh my God.
And so, like, Mark Stoops at Kentucky has won has more seasons of double-digit wins than Texas A&M does in the last 25 years. So how is that hire not good enough for you? I'm befuddled.
A&M, man. It's A&M, and I was talking to a person that's close to that program that knows a lot of stuff that goes on in the NIL world and the coaching world. And I told them, I said, look, and they think Elijah Robinson's a good hire, right? Now, I can't fault them on their thinking, and because they made some valid points of why it's a good hire as far as like keeping talent, the players, the fans, the other coaches that are on staff right now want him there. But to me, that's the problem, is that everybody that's there now that was under Fisher want him to be the head guy. That to me would be, if I'm Ross Bjork, that is the hugest red flag of all red flags, is that they're wanting to keep everything intact that was under Jimbo Fisher. And that can't be how you operate. Look, Lincoln Riley left. You could tell the program was moving in a direction that OU fans weren't happy about, the administration wasn't happy about at that time, and they knew that there was some hard roads coming. Venables said it. There's going to be some up and downs in how we do things because we're building a culture. We're building a relational culture that isn't transactional, kind of talking about the NIL and all that type of stuff, which they play the NIL game. Oklahoma does, but they wanted guys that wanted to buy into what they're doing culturally, to what they're doing off the field, to what they're doing on the field, the work you have to put in the strength and conditioning and in the film room and all that type of stuff. And they got rid of 46% of their roster. Year one, brought back 54%, got rid of another 30% year two, built up. Now they're at 76% of the roster is Venables, right? The other is Riley stuff, mule shoes. But it's enough that they went from 6-7, and now the culture, they're 10-2. And it's long-lasting success because it's their culture. It's guys that buy into what they're doing long-term. A&M's doing it ass backwards, Parker. They want to keep what was causing them to lose.
Yeah.
All for the name of keeping the 5 stars. If those 5 stars go somewhere else and they're split up, they're going to be good players. But together, they're a bunch of me's. Apart, they're probably we's, if that makes sense. So,
for those around my age that grew up in the VeggieTales generation, you remember the saying, how do you kill a weed? You go to the root. A&M doesn't go to the root. Nope. They are unwilling to do that. And as long as they're unwilling to do that, you're going to keep running into the same issues, man.
The VeggieTales analogy is not what I had on my bingo card today. All right. And yes, I remember I'm older than you, but I have got cousins that are your age, so I remember all that stuff. So, all right, that's gonna do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Emergency Podcast. Oklahoma is looking for an offensive coordinator, and we are going to have you covered on OU Insider. Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale, all going on right now, all encompassed into one on OU Insider. It's regular $99 for a whole year, $24. You can go to OU Insider for $24 for literally 2 Starbucks coffees, essentially 2 or 3 Starbucks coffees. You can go grab OU Insider for a whole year. We'll get you all the way through both national signing days, all the transfer, all the coaching changes, all the junior days that are going to come up in January and February, in March, the spring football, all the offseason team stuff, the basketball. The basketball team's great, and we've got you covered there too. Promise you. Softball, we've got you covered. Baseball, we've got you covered. Spring football, all the official visits, all the unofficial visits, all the party in the palace, the champion barbecue, the fall camp stuff, all the Under Armour, the Rivals camp, the opening that's going to start back up this offseason. Parker and I will be all over it. Recruiting coverage galore. You get all of that, and you get all of the SEC season. OU's first season in the SEC. You get all of that for $24 right now. All you have to do is go to ouinsider.com, type in Rivals 2023, and you can have OU Insider for $24. But that deal ends at 10 p.m. on Monday, Cyber Monday. So you better get to OU Insider right now. Join the thousands and thousands of OU fans that are already on there, and we will have you covered with what's going to happen with the OU coaching staff moving forward and what's going to happen with the bowl, the national signing day, the transfers, all of that. We've got you covered on OU Insider, and you get us for a whole year. Again, that's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners Emergency Podcast. For Parker Thune, my name's Brandon Drum. We'll see you on OU Insider.